Here's what Donald Trump's lawyers are demanding happen to the special counsel investigation into Trump's mishandling of classified documents down at Mar-a-Lago. Quote, the Department of Justice should be ordered to stand down. Stand down. That was the conclusion of a new 10-page letter from Trump's lawyers. Nothing to see here. Just shut the whole thing down. Now, criminal defense attorneys regularly appear before judges and argue that the charges against their clients should be dropped or that an investigation infringes on their clients' rights. But Trump's lawyers did not address that in the letter to the judge, nor did they address that letter to the Department of Justice. They didn't send it to a judge. They didn't send it to the DOJ. That letter, that plea for relief from Donald Trump's legal team, was addressed to a Republican member of Congress, specifically to the Republican chair of the House Intelligence Committee. And that is highly unusual. What Trump's legal team is asking here is for Congress to interfere with an independent criminal investigation. In their letter, the lawyers argued that it wasn't Trump's fault that those classified documents ended up at Mar-a-Lago. It was White House staffers and deep state government employees who were to blame. But as the Washington Post reported back in August, Trump himself oversaw the collection of documents that were sent to Mar-a-Lago. And that is not the only questionable part of this letter. Throughout it, Trump's lawyers attempt to blur the lines by basically ignoring the key allegations against Mr. Trump, like, for example, that Trump obstructed investigators in their attempts to retrieve documents, that it took a year to get 15 boxes of highly sensitive documents back. And it also took a subpoena and a raid to get the other 103 classified documents that were also in Trump's possession. But no need to mention all of those other details in the letter. Nothing to see here, folks. That letter from Trump's lawyers to the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, it was also sent to Congressman Jim Himes, the ranking Democrat on that committee and a member of the Gang of Eight. And as a result, Congressman Himes has seen some of these documents after the group gained access to them 2 weeks ago. Joining us now to discuss all this is Congressman Jim Himes himself, member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thank you for joining me tonight. I wonder if I'm in some way reading this wrong, but on its face, this effectively seems like a letter that's asking Republicans to override the separation of powers that is outlined in our Constitution, is it not?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, on a couple of occasions in that letter, the lawyers say the Department of Justice should be ordered to stop their investigation. I mean, it's just bizarre. These are lawyers, right? They know that there is no circumstance under which the Congress or the Intelligence Committee or the chairman of the Intelligence Committee has any authority to order. And frankly, massively improper. Not surprising, but massively improper to imagine that political players, and in this building we're all political players, should get involved in questions around prosecution. Again, that not surprising, right? This is the sort of hallmark of Donald Trump. But, you know, the letter is also full of such misrepresentations that as I read it, I thought, you know, these lawyers have really probably put themselves into some jeopardy by suggesting that Biden did exactly the same thing, which, of course, is absolutely not true, suggesting that the National Archives didn't try to help Donald Trump, which is not true. So, you know, again, classic sort of Trump legal strategy of just create as much uncertainty and doubt and fear as you possibly can.
Do you think that the lawyers are emboldened by the behavior of Jim Jordan, who is effectively opening an investigation at the bidding of Trump's defense team into the Manhattan DA's criminal investigation into Trump? I mean, the separation of powers question or the role of Congress in an oversight capacity has been breached by in one investigation. So, hey, couldn't we do it here, too? I mean, do you think that that's had any effect on this?
Well, maybe so. But again, Jim Jordan cannot be held to task by the Bar Association or by judges for his behavior. He is, of course, protected by being a political figure, doing supposedly what passes for his job. Lawyers, of course, can be held accountable by judges. And we've seen that with any number of the counsel that as Mike Pence so memorably said in your previous segment, was giving Donald Trump very, very bad advice. So, you know, look, at the end of the day, I think these lawyers understand that they are dealing with a very serious situation, a very serious special prosecutor with a set of facts that is pretty uncomfortable to them. And I know that they feel like those set of facts and up against the law is an uncomfortable thing because they are doing these games, these PR stunts that frankly make absolutely no sense. But again, it's sort of a classic attribute of the whole Trump show, which is just create as much dust and uncertainty and fear as you possibly can and hope for the best.
When you talk about the seriousness of this investigation into the document retention down at Mar-a-Lago, you're one of the few people that's actually laid eyes on some of these documents. We know from reporting that some of the documents you've likely seen include material on a foreign nation's nuclear capabilities, papers with secrets about China and Iran, briefings for foreign leaders ahead of foreign calls with foreign leaders, and maps containing sensitive intelligence. Now, I know you can't talk about what you have seen, but is there a way you might broadly characterize the material that was taken from Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, I certainly can't get into the details, but I can tell you, knowing generally what was in the materials, not just of Mar-a-Lago, but of what was recovered from Vice President Pence's residence and what was recovered from President Biden's offices, I guess. Yeah, it's serious stuff. It is really serious stuff. And frankly, anything that is classified is potentially serious stuff. And look, just think about the way that just, 10 days ago, people in this building were lighting their hair on fire over the leaks out of this 109th Intelligence Unit in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, by this 21-year-old airman. Everybody here was lighting themselves on fire over that. A lot of those same people, when highly classified documents were found at Mar-a-Lago, they started saying, well, how classified was it? Was it really classified? Look, if it's classified, it is potentially damaging to the national security of the United States. And though I can't get into the details, I can tell you, based on knowing what was in there, that some of this stuff could be really, really damaging were it to find its way, or were it to have found its way into the hands of our adversaries, or frankly, anybody else.
When you talk about how damaging it is to national security, in the letter, the Trump lawyers say basically shut down this DOJ probe, have the intelligence community do an assessment about this classified material. But the intelligence community is already doing its own investigation into just how damaging this breach of national security is, or the papers being in the wrong place are in terms of national security. Do we have any sense of where that investigation is and when we will have conclusions about the value of these documents to America's safety?
Yeah, so that investigation, that damage assessment has been underway for some time, and we've gotten some preliminary judgments about what the answer may be there. But this is tough stuff. There's a lot of documents there, and what you care about in a document is not so much what the document says, but you have to go back and look at how did we come to know these things, because it is in the how we came to know these things, whether it was a technical collection mechanism or maybe it's a person, a human intelligence source. You really need to go back and say, could the Russians or whoever kind of work their way backwards to that source? That's a matter of life and death for humans, and frankly, it's a matter of life and death if technical collection get compromised.